Welcome back to ABC General Hospital Spoilers Channel. Today, we will learn about the issue of Jocelyn Jacks, S. Vaughn and the brutal line Jack Brennan just crossed in Port Charles. Here is a brand new, greatly expanded breakdown of how Vaughn's shocking removal will blow up Jocelyn's world and expose the true extent of Brennan's power over her future. Brennan's ruthless move against Vaughn. In the blink of an eye, what started as a forbidden workplace romance turned into a professional execution as Brennan decided that Vaughn's feelings for Jocelyn were no longer just inconvenient, but a direct challenge to his authority and long-term agenda. Instead of another warning or a quiet dressing down, Brennan arranged for Vaughn to be physically confronted by fellow agents, dragged away in front of colleagues, and quietly erased from the Port Charles operation as if he were a liability that needed to disappear before it contaminated the mission. Brennan's decision did not come out of nowhere. He had already extended the couple one last mercy with extra time away together, making this final crackdown feel less like a snap reaction and more like a calculated demonstration that when he says last chance, he means it in the most chilling, literal way possible. Jocelyn's heartbreak, rage, and guilt. For Jocelyn, Vaughn's sudden absence will not register as a simple transfer. It will feel like an intentional ripping away of the one person who made the dangerous spy world around her feel human and worth the risk. At first, she may cling to denial, convincing herself that Vaughn was sent on a temporary assignment or that some bureaucratic reshuffle is to blame. But the timing and Brennan's cold eyes when she demands answers will quickly force her to see this as punishment aimed directly at her heart. Once that realization lands, Jocelyn will likely swing between grief and fury, blaming herself for sneaking around, blaming Vaughn for ignoring orders, and most of all blaming Brennan for weaponizing his power over their careers to crush a relationship that had barely begun to breathe. Where did Vaughn really go? What makes Vaughn's exit even more disturbing is the secrecy surrounding his destination, opening the door to several dark possibilities that will haunt Jocelyn every time her phone doesn't buzz with a message from him. One scenario is that Brennan, wanting to send an unmistakable message to everyone in his orbit, has Vaughn locked away in an off-the-grid WASB facility, where discipline looks a lot more like imprisonment, interrogation, and forced debriefs, effectively cutting him off from the outside world and from Jocelyn's reach. The more optimistic, but still painful option is that Vaughn has been reassigned to a distant post under strict supervision, his every move monitored to ensure he never again mixes duty with forbidden romance, leaving Jocelyn to wonder if he chose to accept that fate quietly to protect her, or if Brennan simply never gave him a choice at all. Brennan's twisted code and control over Jocelyn. What makes Brennan so dangerous in this storyline is not just his rank, but the personal code he lives by. He breaks rules when it benefits his objectives, yet demands absolute obedience from those beneath him and treats any emotional attachment as a potential traitor in the making. Even Jocelyn knows that Brennan is no saint. She has seen him bend protocols and play dirty, but she is about to learn that he draws a hard line when someone under his command dares to ignore a direct order, especially after he feels he has already been generous with warnings and second chances. By removing Vaughn, Brennan is not just punishing a disobedient subordinate, he is also sending Jocelyn a chilling message that her feelings will always come second to the mission, and that he is fully prepared to use her loved ones, her job, and her future assignments as leverage to keep her in line, a dynamic that fits perfectly with your preference for expanded, more intense character-driven rewrites rather than simple recaps. How this fallout reshapes Jocelyn's future. In the days ahead, Jocelyn's reaction will likely be explosive. She may confront Brennan publicly, threaten to quit, or even consider going rogue to track down Vaughn, only to realize that every route she chooses runs straight through the man who holds all the power over her professional life. Brennan, however, does not need to scream or defend himself. He can simply lean on the rules, remind her of the mission, and insist that agents who cannot separate personal desire from operational necessity do not belong in the field. all while refusing to confirm where Vaughn is or if she will ever see him again. That chilling uncertainty will become Jocelyn's new reality, forcing her to decide whether to bury her anger and prove she can be the focused operative Brennan demands, or risk everything: her job, her safety, and even her freedom by challenging a man who has just proven he can make someone vanish from Port Charles with a single decision. Next, we will learn about the shocking developments between Dante Falconeri, his biological son Joe Palmieri, and Brooklyn Quartermain that have left fans absolutely devastated and reaching for their tissue boxes. The drama unfolding in Port Charles has reached a fever pitch, and viewers everywhere are experiencing emotional whiplash from the latest confrontation that nobody saw coming. Last week's explosive episodes delivered a gut-wrenching moment that sent shockwaves through the General Hospital fan community, leaving longtime viewers clutching their pearls and gasping in disbelief at what transpired between father and son. Detective Dante Falconeri, typically known for his calm demeanor and rational approach to difficult situations, completely lost his composure once again and unleashed a torrent of anger directly at Giovanni Joe Palmieri, his newly discovered biological son who has been trying desperately to forge a meaningful relationship with his birth father. This wasn't the first time Dante has allowed his emotions to override his better judgment when it comes to Joe, and that's precisely what makes this situation so heartbreaking and frustrating for everyone watching. Fans immediately recognized the troubling pattern emerging, with their minds racing back to that devastating hospital scene that still haunts our memories. During that earlier incident, Dante had similarly exploded with rage toward Joe after his son Rocco Falconeri was rushed to the emergency room in critical condition, fighting for his life after suffering from severe alcohol poisoning that could have easily turned fatal. The terror and panic Dante experienced watching Rocco's life hang in the balance caused him to lash out irrationally, seeking someone to blame for the nightmare scenario unfolding before his eyes. History repeating itself in the most painful way. What makes this current situation even more infuriating and tragic is that Dante appears to have learned absolutely nothing from his previous outburst and the damage it caused to his fragile relationship with Joe. It's as if the lesson he should have absorbed about unfairly blaming Joe for circumstances beyond the young man's control went in one ear and out the other completely. The detective has somehow managed to repeat his past mistake with alarming precision, demonstrating a disturbing inability to see how his misplaced anger is systematically destroying any chance of building a healthy father-son bond with Joe. This time around, however, the consequences of Dante's explosive temper and poor judgment may prove to be far more permanent and irreversible than before. The breaking point for Joe appears to be rapidly approaching, and viewers can sense that the emotional walls he's building around his heart are growing taller and more impenetrable with each passing day. The young man has shown remarkable patience and resilience in the face of repeated rejection, but everyone has their limits. There's only so many times someone can extend an olive branch and try to make peace before they finally decide to protect themselves from further emotional harm. The pain reflected in Gio's eyes during these recent confrontations has been palpable and absolutely heartbreaking to witness, making it clear that Dante's words are cutting deeper than he could possibly realize or intend. Michael Corinthos steps in with crucial guidance. Fortunately, not everyone in Port Charles is failing Joe during this incredibly difficult period of his life. Michael Corinthos, who knows a thing or two about complicated family dynamics and father-son relationships gone wrong, took it upon himself to have a private heart-to-heart conversation with Brooklyn Quartermain. Michael's timely intervention and words of wisdom appear to have made a significant and lasting impact on Brooklyn, helping her find the courage and conviction to step up for her son in a way that truly matters. The pep talk Michael delivered resonated deeply with Brooklyn, awakening her maternal instincts and strengthening her resolve to be the parent Joe desperately needs right now, even if it means standing in direct opposition to Dante's perspective on the situation. Brooklyn arrived for her conversation with Joe with a completely open heart and genuine intentions to provide comfort and support during his darkest hour. She had mentally prepared herself to be present for her biological son, ready to listen and validate his feelings about being repeatedly blamed and rejected by Dante. However, what Brooklyn absolutely did not anticipate or prepare herself for was the possibility that Joe might finally acknowledge her as his mother in such a direct and meaningful way. The young woman walked into that moment focused solely on easing his pain, never imagining she was about to experience one of the most emotionally significant moments of her entire life. The explosive confrontation that changed everything. When Dante completely unraveled and verbally attacked Joe with shocking ferocity, the entire fan base collectively released an exhausted, frustrated sigh of recognition. We all knew exactly where this storyline was heading the moment Dante opened his mouth to unleash his fury. The detective's rage seemed disproportionate and misdirected, especially considering the actual circumstances surrounding the latest crisis involving Professor Henry Hank Dalton. Dante berated Joe mercilessly for failing to predict or prevent what Rocco might do regarding the professor, placing impossible expectations on the young man and holding him accountable for outcomes that were completely beyond his control or ability to foresee. The fundamental problem with Dante's explosive reaction is that he's demanding Joe possess psychic abilities and perfect foresight into Rocco's decision-making process. How could Joe possibly have known what actions Rocco would take regarding Professor Dalton? The expectation is not only unreasonable, but borders on absurd when examined logically. Yet Dante, blinded by his protective instincts toward Rocco and unable to process his own fear and anxiety in a healthy manner, needed someone to serve as a target for his overwhelming emotions. Tragically, that target has repeatedly been Joe, the son who is desperate for acceptance and trying so hard to prove his worth to a father who seems determined to see only the negative. A father's misdirected rage destroys fragile bonds. What troubles viewers most intensely about these recurring confrontations is the specific quality and intensity of anger Dante directs toward Joe. This isn't the measured disappointment or firm correction we've witnessed Dante use with others in the past. The fury he unleashes on Joe carries a vicious edge that fans have typically only observed when Dante is dealing with dangerous criminals, sworn enemies, or during his most volatile confrontations with his father, Sonny Corinthos. There's a harshness and lack of compassion in Dante's tone that feels completely inappropriate for a father addressing his son, especially a son who is still essentially a stranger trying to find his place in Dante's established family structure. The relationship between Dante and Joe had finally started showing genuine signs of healing and progress before this latest setback. They were gradually building trust and understanding, carefully constructing the foundation of what could have become a meaningful father-son relationship. Joe had demonstrated remarkable maturity and grace by choosing to forgive Dante for the previous unjust accusation regarding Rocco's attendance at the college party where the teenager consumed dangerous amounts of alcohol. That earlier incident perfectly illustrated Dante's troubling pattern of jumping to the worst possible conclusions about Joe without bothering to gather actual facts or evidence first. Brooklyn's heart-to-heart changes the game completely. After witnessing Danny's latest cruel outburst, Brooklyn knew she couldn't remain silent or neutral any longer. She approached Joe with genuine empathy and opened her heart completely, creating a safe space where he could express his frustrations and profound sadness over being rejected so brutally by Dante yet again. Brooklyn spoke from a place of authentic concern and maternal love, making it crystal clear that she fundamentally disagreed with Dante's handling of the situation. She didn't make excuses for her son's father or try to smooth over the damage with empty platitudes. Instead, she validated Gio's hurt feelings and explicitly told him that Dante was wrong to treat him that way. This straightforward honesty and unwavering support was exactly what Joe needed to hear in that vulnerable moment. He required confirmation that he wasn't crazy, that his hurt feelings were justified, and that at least one parent in his corner could see the situation clearly and stand up for him. Brooklyn's willingness to openly criticize Dante's behavior and align herself with Joe sent a powerful message about where her loyalties lie when it comes to protecting her son's emotional well-being. She wasn't interested in maintaining false harmony or keeping the peace at Gio's expense. The moment that shattered every heart. Then came the moment that absolutely destroyed viewers across the country and left not a single dry eye in the audience. After Brooklyn finished expressing her support and making her position clear, Joe looked at her with such genuine gratitude and affection. His response was simple but carried earth-shattering emotional weight. He thanked her sincerely for standing by him and defending him, and then he spoke the single word that Brooklyn had been longing to hear but never dared to expect. Mom. In that instant, everything changed between them forever. The formal barriers completely crumbled, and Joe officially acknowledged Brooklyn as his mother in a way that transcended biology and legal definitions. Fans everywhere reached for tissues, sobbing at the beauty and emotional power of this milestone moment that felt so earned and genuine after everything these two characters have endured. New territory and uncertain futures. Brooklyn and Joe have now officially crossed over into completely uncharted territory in their relationship, and Brooklyn feels absolutely zero regret or hesitation about this major development. She's not going to apologize for embracing her role as Gio's mother, nor will she feel guilty about leaving Dante to face the natural consequences of his own destructive choices. Dante made conscious decisions about how to treat their son, and now he'll have to live with the reality of being the bad cop while Brooklyn gladly assumes the role of supportive, understanding parent in this increasingly complicated co-parenting dynamic. The question now becomes what happens next for these three individuals whose lives are so intricately connected yet fundamentally at odds. Will the emotional bond between Brooklyn and Joe continue to strengthen and deepen as she becomes his primary source of parental support and unconditional love? Will Gio's heartache over feeling continuously rejected and misunderstood by Dante push him further into Brooklyn's embrace, creating an us versus him mentality that could permanently damage any hope of family unity? And perhaps most importantly, will Dante interpret Brooklyn's wholehearted acceptance and defense of their son as tacit approval of whatever role Joe played in the situations involving Rocco, even though that's absolutely not the message she intends to send? Next, we will learn about the explosive developments happening in Port Charles this week that will leave viewers absolutely stunned. The week of November 24th, 2025 promises to deliver jaw-dropping revelations, heart-wrenching family drama, and dangerous secrets that threaten to destroy everything our beloved characters hold dear. Let's dive deep into what's about to unfold in this unforgettable week of General Hospital, Rocco's heartbreaking predicament behind bars. The Falconeri family is being torn apart by an unthinkable nightmare that no parent should ever have to endure. Young Rocco Falconeri finds himself locked away in juvenile detention, trapped behind cold steel bars for a crime that he absolutely did not commit. The injustice of the situation weighs heavily on everyone involved, but especially on the innocent teenager who should be spending his days at school with friends, not confined to a cell surrounded by actual criminals. The preview clip reveals an absolutely devastating moment when Dante Falconeri visits his son in the bleak, institutional setting of the juvenile facility. The temporary police commissioner's heart is visibly breaking as he sees his boy in this horrific situation, wearing the standard issue detention clothing and sitting across from him in a sterile visitation room. Rocco, trying desperately to maintain hope despite the dire circumstances, looks at his father with vulnerable eyes and asks the question that's been consuming his thoughts day and night. Will he be released in time to celebrate Thanksgiving with his family? The holiday is rapidly approaching, and the thought of spending it away from his loved ones, away from the traditional turkey dinner and the warmth of home, is almost too much for the young man to bear. Unfortunately, Danny's facial expression tells the entire heartbreaking story before he even speaks a single word. The commissioner's usually confident demeanor crumbles, replaced by uncertainty and deep concern that he struggles to hide from his son. He knows the legal system moves slowly, And despite his position within law enforcement, there's frustratingly little he can personally do to expedite Rocco's release without compromising the investigation or appearing to abuse his authority. The truth about what really happened. What makes this entire situation even more infuriating is that Rocco is completely innocent of the charges brought against him. While it's true that Rocco was present at the laboratory facility alongside Danny Morgan and Charlotte Casadini, the three teenagers never actually committed the crimes they're being accused of. They entered the lab that much is factually accurate, but the extensive damage and destruction that Professor Henry Hank Dalton reported to authorities never actually occurred at the hands of these kids. The broken equipment, shattered glassware, and vandalized research materials that Hank claimed were destroyed by the teenagers tell a very different story than what actually transpired that fateful night. Someone is lying, and that someone appears to be the professor himself. But why would a respected academic deliberately frame three innocent teenagers? What could possibly motivate him to destroy their lives with false accusations? The motivations behind Hank's deception run deeper than anyone currently realizes, and the truth will shock Port Charles to its core when it finally comes to light. Meanwhile, Rocco sits in juvenile detention, paying the price for crimes he didn't commit, while the real story remains buried beneath layers of lies and manipulation. The teenager is experiencing the harsh reality of how quickly life can change, how easily reputations can be destroyed, and how the justice system doesn't always deliver actual justice. His friends and family rally around him, but their support can't unlock the cell door or erase the charges from his record. Dante makes a chilling discovery. Back at the Port Charles Police Department, Temporary Commissioner Dante Falconeri is juggling multiple crises simultaneously, each one more complicated than the last. His personal life is in turmoil, with his son behind bars, but his professional responsibilities demand his full attention as new developments emerge that threaten to derail everything. In a shocking moment that sends ripples through the entire police station, Dante makes an announcement that stops everyone in their tracks. Professor Henry Hank Dalton has disappeared without a trace. The man who accused three teenagers of destroying his laboratory, the key witness in the case against Rocco, Danny, and Charlotte, has suddenly vanished into thin air under highly suspicious circumstances. When Dante reveals this jarring information to his colleagues gathered in the squad room, the reaction from Mayor Laura Collins is immediate and unmistakable. Laura lets out an involuntary gasp that echoes through the suddenly silent room, her face draining of color as the implications of Danny's words hit her like a physical blow. Her shocked reaction doesn't go unnoticed by the observant officers present, and several pairs of eyes turn toward the mayor with newfound curiosity and suspicion. What does Laura know about Hank's disappearance? Why would the mayor react so dramatically to news about a missing professor? The questions swirl through the minds of everyone who witnessed her visceral response, and Laura realizes with growing dread that her carefully constructed facade is beginning to crack under the pressure. Laura's danger is secret. The mayor of Port Charles is harboring a secret that could destroy her career, her reputation, and potentially her freedom if the truth comes to light. Laura Collins finds herself in an impossible position, trapped between her deeply ingrained moral compass and the necessity of protecting herself and others from catastrophic consequences. While Laura didn't actually kill Professor Hank Dalton, that much is absolutely true. The circumstances surrounding his disappearance paint a picture that could easily be misinterpreted by law enforcement and prosecutors looking for answers. If Laura had immediately called the police and reported what she knew, what she witnessed, what she was involved in, it would have been the right thing to do legally and morally. However, making that call would have instantly made her the prime suspect in what authorities would undoubtedly treat as a suspicious disappearance or possible homicide investigation. The optics of the situation are absolutely terrible from every conceivable angle. A prominent politician connected to a missing person who was involved in a controversial case against teenagers. The media would have a field day, and Laura's political enemies would use the scandal to destroy everything she's built over her years of public service. As the investigation into Hank's whereabouts intensifies and more resources are devoted to finding the missing professor, Laura's position becomes increasingly precarious and dangerous. Every question from investigators feels like a trap. Every interaction with law enforcement colleagues carries the risk of exposure, and the weight of maintaining the cover story grows heavier with each passing day. Sonny's stern warning. Sonny Corinthos, the powerful mob boss who has built an empire on secrets, intimidation, and calculated risks, recognizes the danger that Laura faces better than almost anyone. In a separate preview clip that reveals the extent of Sonny's involvement in this tangled web of deception, he issues a stern warning to the mayor in no uncertain terms. The conversation between these two influential Port Charles residents crackles with tension as Sonny explains the harsh reality of their situation. If Laura isn't extremely careful about how she handles herself moving forward, both of them will face serious criminal charges that could result in significant prison time. Sonny's warning isn't delivered as a threat, but rather as a frank assessment from someone who understands the criminal justice system from the defendant's perspective. He knows how quickly investigations can shift direction, how prosecutors build cases from seemingly innocuous details, and how one careless word or inconsistent statement can transform someone from a witness into a suspect. Laura must maintain absolute consistency in her story, never wavering from the established narrative regardless of pressure from investigators or her own guilty conscience. However, Sonny's concerns about Laura's ability to maintain the deception are entirely justified. Laura Collins has built her entire political career on principles of transparency, honesty, and moral leadership. She's known throughout Port Charles as someone with unshakable integrity, a woman who always does the right thing even when it's politically inconvenient or personally costly. This reputation makes her an unlikely criminal conspirator, which works in her favor. But it also means that lying and maintaining a false narrative goes against every instinct she possesses. Sonny watches her carefully, trying to gauge whether Laura has the necessary steel to see this through to the end, or whether her conscience will ultimately compel her to confess everything and accept the legal consequences. The mob boss has orchestrated countless cover-ups over his decades in organized crime, but he's never had to depend on someone as fundamentally decent as Laura Collins to maintain one. It's a gamble that makes even Sonny nervous. Sonny confronts the Ada. Meanwhile, Sonny Corinthos is channeling his considerable power and influence in another direction, attempting to secure Rocco's release from juvenile detention through whatever means necessary. In a tense confrontation that showcases both Sonny's authority and his genuine affection for the Falconeri family, the mob boss issues direct orders to Assistant District Attorney Justine Turner. The conversation is brief and unambiguous. Justine needs to get Rocco out of juvenile detention immediately, using whatever legal mechanisms are at her disposal. Sonny's tone makes it clear this isn't a request or a favor, it's an order from someone who expects compliance from those in his sphere of influence. However, despite Sonny's formidable reputation and the intimidation factor of receiving orders from Port Charles's most powerful criminal figure, Justine finds herself in an incredibly difficult position. The ADA's hands may be tied by legal procedures, prosecutorial guidelines, and evidence requirements that even Sonny Corinthos can't simply override with force of personality. Justine must balance her awareness of Sonny's expectations against her professional obligations and the reality of the case as it currently stands. Without new evidence proving Rocco's innocence or exposing Hank's lies, securing the teenager's release becomes legally problematic regardless of who's applying pressure. Justine is caught between the proverbial rock and hard place, knowing that disappointing Sonny carries its own set of consequences, while also understanding that she can't simply fabricate legal grounds for dismissing charges or releasing a detained minor. The Ada must navigate this treacherous situation carefully, looking for legitimate legal avenues to help Rocco while protecting herself from both professional sanctions and Sonny's displeasure. Ava delivers shocking news to Portia. In another explosive development that promises to shake Port Charles, Ava Jerome approaches Dr. Portia Robinson with information that sends the pregnant physician into an absolute panic. The preview clip shows Ava delivering news that hits Portia like a freight train, causing the doctor's professional composure to completely shatter. Portia, who is already dealing with the physical and emotional challenges of pregnancy, finds herself confronting yet another crisis that threatens her family's stability and happiness. Her reaction is visceral and immediate. She demands to know what's happening now, her voice rising with a mixture of fear, frustration, and barely contained hysteria. What information could Ava possibly possess that would provoke such a dramatic reaction from the usually level-headed physician? Given Ava's history of manipulation, schemes, and involvement in Port Charles's darkest secrets, the possibilities are genuinely terrifying. Whatever news Ava brings, it's clear that Portia's world is about to be turned completely upside down at the worst possible time. A pregnant woman should be focusing on her health, preparing for her baby's arrival, and enjoying this special time with her partner. But instead, Portia faces yet another catastrophe that demands her immediate attention and emotional energy. Curtis under investigation. As if Portia didn't have enough to worry about with her pregnancy and whatever shocking revelation Ava has just delivered. Her husband Curtis Ashford suddenly finds himself under official police scrutiny. In a development that no one saw coming, Commissioner Dante Falconeri instructs his officers to take another look at Curtis, suggesting that the popular nightclub owner may be connected to ongoing investigations in ways that weren't previously apparent. The instruction sends a clear message through the police department. Curtis Ashford is now officially a person of interest in matters that could have serious legal ramifications. What has Curtis been involved in that would warrant this level of police attention? Has he been hiding activities from his wife that are about to be exposed? Or is Curtis simply another innocent victim of circumstances beyond his control, much like Rocco Falconeri? The investigation puts both Curtis and Portia at risk. Curtis potentially faces criminal charges, while Portia must cope with the stress and public scrutiny of having her husband investigated while carrying their child. The Ashford family, which should be celebrating the upcoming arrival of their baby and enjoying a period of happiness and stability, instead faces an uncertain future filled with legal threats, reputational damage, and the very real possibility that Curtis could be arrested and prosecuted. Portia's earlier panic takes on new dimensions as the full scope of the threats facing her family becomes apparent. She's about to give birth while simultaneously dealing with whatever shocking information Ava provided and watching her husband become entangled in a police investigation that could tear their lives apart. This week on General Hospital promises absolutely unmissable drama that will leave viewers breathless. The stakes have never been higher for the residents of Port Charles as secrets threaten to explode, families face destruction, and the truth lurks just beneath the surface, waiting to emerge and devastate everyone involved. Make sure you don't miss a single episode as these storylines reach their explosive peaks.